Today we are going to learn about FDI trends in India. After this unit, you will find that it has been organized to examine the trends of foreign investment inflows in India, which have grown substantially since 1992, and we would like to analyze the factors influence the flows with a view to understanding the prospects for inflows in future. After going through this module, you shall be able to have an overview of India's policy towards foreign investment. You shall also be able to describe FDI trends in the country and analyze major roadblocks faced by foreign investors. In the end, we would also appraise the trends and the impact on the Indian economy. Let us look at the India's policy towards foreign capital. In this section, we try to attempt to present an overview of India's foreign investment policy. Since independence, foreign investment policy can be studied under 4 distinct phases. The phase 1 can be described as from 1948 to 1966, which was marked by a cautious approach, and it was followed by phase 2 from 1967 to 1979, which was characterized by a restrictive regime. Phase 3 from 1980 to 1990 exhibited a progressive accentuation of regulations, and phase 4 1991 onwards, which witnessed liberal foreign investment environment. The attitude towards foreign investment are reflected in India's official policy towards private foreign investment, which can also be defined as PFI, and the technology. Successive policy statements, beginning with the Prime Minister's 1949 policy statement on foreign capital, have recognized the technological and financial contribution of PFI to the economy. Foreign firms have been assured that there would be no restrictions on the repatriation of capital and remittances of profits, and that there would be no nationalization without compensation. Foreign firms have also been offered various forms of tax exemption and tax concessions. While the broad framework of policy has not been hostile to foreign enterprise participation, PFI has been subject to a detailed set of regulations concerning its sectoral allocation and the nature of its participation. The regulatory framework has had an impact on the composition and organizational pattern of foreign enterprises articulation in India. In some, strict controls and draconian restrictions were imposed under the FARA on the areas of investment, extent of shareholding, dividend repatriation, holding of property, etc. Now, this rather restrictive perception of the role of foreign investment, not surprisingly, resulted in a setback for foreign investment. The 4th phase starts when the government focused its attention on dismantling the control so as to remove unnecessary hurdles, and government initiated a number of measures in this regard to improve and attract foreign investment. This policy is appraised on a continuing basis, and measures for its further liberalization are taken. India has liberalized her FDI policy regime considerably since 1991, besides opening new sectors to FDI. Very recently, the government announced a consolidated policy on May 12, 2015, and many initiatives in recent years have been taken relaxing FDI norms across sectors such as defense, PSU oil refineries, telecom, power exchanges and stock exchanges, among others. Easier FDI rules for construction sector where 100% overseas investment is permitted, which will allow overseas investors to exit a project even before its completion. It also includes 100% FDI permission under automatic route in completed projects for operation and management of townships, malls and business centers. Higher FDI has also been allowed on a case-to-case basis. Other norms such as simplifying the application process for an industrial license were relaxed. The list of equipment that requires industrial licenses was reduced. In addition to increase in sectoral caps, simplification of procedures would substantially improve the value for foreign investors. Over time, both inflows and outflows under capital account have been gradually liberalized. Foreign investment is now permitted in virtually every sector except those of strategic concerns. Sectors in which FDI is prohibited are lottery, gambling and betting, chit funds, nidhi company, manufacturing of cigars, cheroots, cigars, cigarettes, of tobacco or tobacco substitutes, sectors not open to private sector investment, atomic energy and railway operations. So you have a very limited list where the FDI is not allowed. Let us look at FDI related authorities. Which are the authorities which control FDI in India? The foreign investment policy announcements are generally made by Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, known as DIPP, which are subsequently notified by RBI under Foreign Exchange Management Act, known as FEMA. In an attempt to adopt the IMF guidelines effective March 31, 1992, the objective criterion for identifying FDI has been fixed at 10% ownership of ordinary share capital for a single investor. As such, definitions underlying the data on foreign investment underwent a change in 1992. RBI's automatic approval permission will be granted for FDI and foreign technology agreements in high priority industries subject to certain conditions. Besides automatic route, a three-tier system for approvals for foreign investment has been put in place. What are these three? The Foreign Investment Promotion Board, or FIPB, the Secretariat for Industrial Assistance, known as SIA, and Foreign Investment Implementation Authority, known as FIIA. The inflow and outflow of FDI into India is monitored by Ministry of Commerce and Industry and RBI. A legal framework exists for FDI under automatic and government approval routes, which is regulated by the FEMA, or Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999, and is amended from time to time. What are the policies related to portfolio flows in India? Prior to 1992, only non-resident Indians, or NRIs, and overseas corporate bodies, known as OCBs, were allowed to undertake portfolio investment in India. In line with the recommendations of the Rangarajan's High-Level Committee on Balance of Payments, FIIs were allowed to invest in the Indian debt and equity market. RBI has stated that ceilings on FFI investments have been progressively relaxed, and at present, aggregate investment by FIIs in a company is allowed within the sectoral cap prescribed for FDI. Apart from equity, FFIs registered under the 100% debt route can invest in debt instruments, both government as well as corporate. The current aggregate ceiling being $1 billion. The effective FPI limit was increased by allowing FPIs to invest coupons from G6, which means government securities, outside the overall limit with effect from February 5th, 2015. RBI has also allowed two-way fungibility in ADR/GDR issues of Indian companies that has been introduced, under which investors in India can purchase shares and deposit them with an Indian custodian for issue of ADRs or GDRs by the overseas depository to the extent of ADR/GDRs converted into underlying shares. The experience with capital flows suggests that these flows are highly beneficial if they are absorbed. Portfolio investments are restricted to select players, for example, foreign institutional investors, FFIs. Short-term credits above $20 million require prior approval of the Reserve Bank of India. In respect of NRI deposits, some control over inflows is exercised through specification of interest rate ceilings. In addition to FDI, foreign investor has a number of routes for investment into India. What are these? These include investment in export trading companies, it includes NRI investments, it includes offshore funds, it includes euro issues, foreign institutional investments, and venture capital investments. Scholars like Nagaraj has argued that our policy towards foreign investors does not have a focus. India's FDI policy should aim at encouraging investment in manufacturing for acquisition of technology and for the establishment of international trading channels to facilitate labor-intensive exports. The problem highlighted is that in dismantling the pre-1991 regulation of FDI, India has not just swung to the other extreme. The government has not set about creating a policy regime that has neither coherence nor macroeconomic purpose, the only objective being to create what it thinks is a set of incentives that will bring in large volume of FDI. Countries like India need to follow policies to allow more desirable FDI inflows which have local content requirements and generate favorable externalities for domestic investments. The best idea, however, is to have a government that is not a prisoner of ideology. India is an attractive FDI destination now, but the government needs to do more to sustain large inflows. Policy regime is one of the key factors driving investment flows to a country. So let us see what is the FDI trends in the country. Trends in FDI flows to India in pre-1991 period. That will be our first point of discussion. Now, one of the most significant developments in the world economy in the 90s has been the spectacular surge in international capital flows. It is noteworthy that the expansion of capital flows has been much larger than that of international trade flows. Now, this section therefore provides trends in volume, patterns, and sources of foreign investment in India. Over the period before 1984, foreign investment continued to take place, although at a slow pace, despite several restrictions even during periods of maximum controls. The total assets of foreign subsidiaries increased by 144% from rupees 11,290 million in 68-69 to 27,590 million in 1982-83 at current prices. Their paid up capital also increased by 72% from rupees 2,400 million to rupees 4,120 million during this period. After 1984, however, the inflow of foreign capital in the form of equity remained quite low. In fact, the net inflows of foreign investments were mainly in the form of retained earnings that could be apportioned to the foreign equity holders. Between 1984 and 1990, actual fresh gross annual inflow of capital was just around 100 million rupees in respect of foreign controlled domestic companies. Let's see what is the volume of FDI post 1991. The policy regime and a positive business environment have ensured that foreign capital keep flowing in the country. FDI to India, which stood at a low level of $97 million during 1991, picked up significantly thereafter. Inflows of FDI registered a spectacular rise to $33 billion in 2010-11. As per RBI data, cumulative FDI inflows from April 2000 to November 2014 were US $350.9 billion or almost $351 billion. There is an illusion about FDI. According to a study co-authored by Biswajit Dhar, which consider every FDI project entailing an investment of $5 million and more between 2004 and 9, provides an insight that proves that a large proportion of FDI is just as volatile and transitory as portfolio capital. The study that considered 2,748 projects, which accounted for almost 90% of all FDI in this period of 2004 to 2009, found that the lowering of norms prescribing the minimum level of equity stake in an FDI invested project from 40% to 10%, offered perverse incentives to capital flowing in the garb of FDI. So FDI in India, which averaged around $1,082.51 US million from 1995 until 2015, it reached an all-time high of $5,670 US million in February 2008 and a record low of $60 US million in February of 2014. So it has been volatile, and it was high in 2008 February and low in February of 2014. Let us try to understand the sectoral distribution of FDI. India has witnessed a large amount of foreign investment in various sectors. From this perspective, FDI in India mainly flowed into services, telecommunication, computer software and hardware, construction activities, manufacturing and others, which largely are comprising electricity and other power generation. FDI in the manufacturing sectors is highest in housing and real estate and construction. Now, given India's infrastructure deficit, it is no surprise that FDI is strong in this area. The first manufacturing segment to enter the top 10 FDI sectors is automobiles. FDI in automobiles reflects both the fast growth of the Indian middle class market and India's international role in the middle to small car segment. Power, metallurgy, and petroleum and natural gas make up the other major sectors of FDI. FDI flowed into the manufacturing sector, followed by financial services, retail, and wholesale trade. Within the manufacturing sector, transport equipment and chemical sectors were the major recipients and accounted for about 50% of the total FDI in 2014-15. Over the recent past, the sector-wise inflows of FDI have undergone a change. In short, we can say that services, construction, telecommunications, computer software and hardware, drugs and pharmaceuticals, the automobile industry, chemicals and power have attracted a proportionately high share of total inflows. So let's look at state-wise distribution of FDI. In India, there are 29 states and 7 union territories. All the states, they give top priority to attract FDI on a large scale for development purposes. FDI inflows to states varies widely, which leads to concentration of FDI inflows to some states. If you look at the state-wise trend in FDI, it shows that Maharashtra, Delhi, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Gujarat have been the largest recipient of FDI in terms of cumulative FDI inflows from, say, January 2000 to October 2015. Now, these states are either known for their strong industrial base like Gujarat or as software hubs like Karnataka and Delhi. Now, this could also be attributed to their better resources, infrastructure like roads and power, investor-friendly policies like single window clearances and investment promotion schemes like special economic zones. However, the competition among the states to promote their own state in attracting FDI has led to an increasing trend in FDI in other states also. Infrastructure and regional development are found to be key factors in attracting higher FDI both in the export and domestic market seeking sectors. What are the sources? From where does we get this FDI? Let's look at that also. Foreign investment is mainly routed through Mauritius, followed by Singapore, US and UK, among other leading sources of FDI. Share of top 5 investing countries in India stood at 69%. So you can see how much was the concentration. Mauritius was the top country of origin for FDI flows into India, primarily driven by the tax haven status enjoyed by Mauritius. According to official data, Mauritius is accounting for an inflow of approximately almost $84 billion of foreign FDI in April 2000 to or between April 2000 to November 2014 period. The inflow of foreign investment from Singapore amounted to approximately 29 billion US dollars, followed by UK at $22 billion and Japan at 18 or 17.6 billion dollars during the same period of April 2000 to November 2014. Now, one important form of foreign capital comes from remittances. It is important to point out that in recent times, India receives large private transfers in the form of remittances or remittance inflows from non-residents, and also capital inflows in the form of NRI deposits. This is an altogether separate category. India continues to attract the largest amount of remittances among developing economies. India has received an amount of $72 billion in 2014-15 from this source, which is twice the estimated current account deficit or CAD for that particular year. According to noted economist Kaushik Basu, remittances act as a major counterbalance when capital flows weaken. Nevertheless, the remittances are not without its problems. The risks involved in this cannot be denied, because a lot of this money does not come in for patriotic reasons alone, but to milk high nominal interest rates in India. Another growing concern is the deepening economic crisis in West Asia resulting from the collapse of oil prices, which could harm remittances from that part of the world. Let us now discuss and learn about FFI investments. They first started flowing to India in 1993. Portfolio investment inflows have since then been substantial, with the lone exception of 1998-1999. During 2014-15, for foreign portfolio investors, which means FPIs, they brought in about US $41 billion to the Indian equity and debt markets, making India the most attractive destination among emerging markets. FDI accounts for just 1% of domestic capital formation in India. Now, according to a study by NCAR, India has inward FDI stock worth $76.2 billion and outward FDI stock of $29.4 billion in 2008. The FDI inflows accounted for 5.8% of gross fixed capital formation, which is also abbreviated as GFCF, in 2007. What are the new trends of MNCs in FDI? Recently, some new trends in foreign investments have taken place in the form of MNCs setting up research centers in India. For example, IBM, Microsoft, GE, Sony Ericsson, and many other MNCs have set up research centers in India. Now, this also utilizes a form of cheaper labor, which is in the form of Indian professionals and scientists. They could be now paid less than their counterparts in the developed countries. Research requires not just individual scientists, but whole groups of such scientists. India is by now well known for the substantial supply of well-qualified scientists and technicians to the world. MNC's research centers in India set up to tap into this supply are responsible for a lot of patents that have been acquired out of India in the IT sector. The growing strength of India is in knowledge-based sectors such as software and R&D, which is manifested in growing foreign investment in these sectors. The investment of foreign capital in setting up research centers in India needs to be noted as a new trend in MNCs operating in developing economies. Another trend is also witnessed in the shape of non-investment foreign controlled production. Foreign influences over host countries' economic activities can well occur without any capital investment at all. Now, this occurs in a country in a number of new forms of relationships. What are these? A contracted manufacturing and farming, outsourcing of services, and franchising or licensing. Now, one increasing common form of global production is that of contracted production within global production networks, also known as GPNs, or global value chains, known as GVCs. In GPN production, the sellers do not sell their product as commodities on the market, nor are they produced through MNC branches. Rather, the producers make them under contract to the buyers. This is frequently the case with many labor-intensive segments of production, now such as manufacture of garments or footwear. In such a contracted global production framework, the buyers specify the output in great detail. The design, color, fabric, types of accessories, everything is specified. Delivery times are fixed. Obviously, prices too are fixed. So in this form of chain or network production, the buyers do not have to undertake any investment in production facilities. Forms of governance, as they are called, enable the buyers to keep control of the output. Such contracted production has extended beyond the relatively simple areas of garments and leather products to complicated electronic products such as laptop and mobiles and other computers. The crucial point, however, is that these are forms of foreign control over production that do not involve foreign capital investment. The growth of such forms of contracted production that provide foreign buyers control without capital investment is an important development for consideration. Let's now look at another trend, which is FDI outflows from India. A reverse trend of foreign investment by Indian companies, that is Indian MNCs, should also be noted. Some major Indian companies such as Tata and Mahindra, they have undertaken substantial FDI in other countries of the world or in many other companies operating in different countries of the world. Tata Steel Chorus, Tata Motors acquisition of Jaguar Land Rover are important examples which happened recently in last few years. Airtel has acquired telecommunication units in Bangladesh and Africa. The Indian IT majors have all set up branches in many countries and also acquired particular technology capabilities. They are either to acquire technology and brand names such as in the case of Jaguar Land Rover, or to acquire access to markets as in Mahindra and Mahindra's investment in the US. The third set of Indian foreign investments is targeted at securing access to raw materials. Public sector companies such as ONGC and Oil India are the major investors in this area. But there are also private investors such as Ambani Industries in petrochemicals. Altogether, these are a set of expanding MNCs of Indian origin. You will find that net FDI flow is therefore computed as inflows less outflows. The rules regarding Indian overseas investments have been progressively relaxed and the procedures have been simplified. Most of India's FDI is in manufacturing, but it has begun to grow rapidly in IT services, particularly through mergers and acquisitions. We have a table which would show you that how we can have a glance at these numbers and have an idea that where are these inflows, FDI's inflows and outflows are happening. So in India, there has been little FDI in export sectors. Indian exports continue to remain based on Indian capital. FDI has largely taken place to access the Indian domestic market as in automobiles. While analyzing the recent trends in FDI flows in India, another noted economist, Raghvendra Jha, finds that FDI flows to India have not been commensurate with her economic potential and performance. The quality of FDI as manifest in technological spillovers, export performance, etc. is more important than its quantity. The study conducted by Chalpati Rao and Vishwajit Dhar has emphasized that there is a need to have a closer look at the present phenomena of FDI. India should build an information base that will allow a proper assessment of the contribution that FDI can make to her economic development. So after learning all this, let us try to understand in another section that what are the roadblocks, hurdles which are faced by foreign investors. It is more than 2 decades since India dismantled its restrictive FDI regimes, let's say in 1990s, and replaced it with one of the most open and relaxed countries. However, even now the debate is about how much more open India should be towards FDI. FDI flows to India continue to be sluggish because foreign investors face major roadblocks. Now, all this made India a far less attractive investment destination for FDI than most of its competitors. Indian policymakers, therefore, must weigh the reasons behind low volume of FDI inflow. They must try to find out the reasons. India can't have foreign investment coming in from MNCs by overruling Supreme Court judgments and proposing laws backward or backdated to tax investors. To recapitulate, the factors which limit the growth of FDI in India are mainly the inefficient and poor quality of infrastructural facilities, slow decision-making process, outdated laws and their inefficient implementation, weak credibility of regulatory system, conflicting role of various agencies of government, bureaucratic procedures, corruption and red tapeism, etc. These are some of the major points which we have highlighted here. Geographically speaking, destinations matter because in which states FDI is going to be is an important aspect of attraction for the investors. According to Ila Patnaik, in India we have tied ourselves in knots. Even at a time when the country needs capital inflows, it is not easy for the government to move at the required speed. The UK Sinha Committee on Capital Controls documented the complex maze of capital controls that has taken the power of switching controls on and off, depending on the need of the hour, away from the government and into the hands of a number of financial regulators. But it is equally important that the system of controls now be re-examined and rationalized, keeping in mind the objectives they serve. Policy measures which are required to remove these hurdles. Maybe at the outset, the World Investment Report asserts that simply opening an economy is no longer enough. There is a need to develop attractive configurations of locational advantages by capitalizing on the synergy of endowments of factors of production. This is what the WIR or World Investment Report suggests. There is an urgent need, therefore, to improve the macroeconomic and organizational framework so that the FDI policy looks more coherent. The pace of improvement in infrastructure should be hastened to convert intent into action in a global market where everybody is out to woo investors. Bold and proactive moves embedded in reality and governed with a will to improve the economic environment of the country are needed to bring about radical changes. The government must strive to set up a single body for dealing with FDI matters in order to clear the confusion of foreign investors, which is very, very important. Also, India should not ignore the importance of regulatory frameworks simultaneously. The FDI policy should focus on the maximization of its contribution to India's development rather than maximization of the magnitude of inflows by itself. The problem before the nation is not whether foreign capital should be welcome, but whether a project can be cleared from A to Z in a short period. Now, given this backdrop, policymakers need to realize that merely liberalizing sectoral caps for FDI across more and more sectors will not bring in more capital. Foreign entrepreneurs, just like their domestic counterparts, are driven primarily by return on investment (ROI) considerations. And to make India an attractive destination for them, sector regulators need to deliver better governance with less government. Therefore, much needs to be done in order to make India an attractive destination for foreign investment. India requires reforms, both in legal and administrative process. Then FDI, which is a real long-term capital, will on its own find way to India. FDI does not flow merely from domestic economic policies. It also requires desirable political actions. The insurmountable problem is to bring in the desirable change in the mindset of India's policymakers. The formulation of an effective strategy mainly requires a vision of development, coherence and coordination between its different objectives. What India urgently needs is to have a proactive policy to attract more FDI. Unfortunately, the infrastructure, be it power, ports, roads or civil aviation, they continue to be pathetic. So infrastructure, let me emphasize, continues to be pathetic. The fetters must go as India needs inflow of capital that is accompanied by technology and business expertise. It is high time for India to have an investment promotion agency IPA which will work to promote the country as an investment destination, target investors and provides for aftercare service in a holistic manner. Currently, these functions are dispersed in different government bodies. The Investment Commission IC could be an abbreviated form of it, could be an effective IPA by undertaking primarily 5 functions. The first one, A, policy advocacy. The second, image making. Third, investment promotion including investor targeting. B, aftercare of investors. And fifth, networking, both globally and within the country with the state level IPAs. It is better to have a negative list and open up all the other sectors for foreign investment. For a country of India's size, the magnitude of the foreign investments cannot and will not be cure-all, a panacea for all the problems. It is neither a necessary nor a sufficient condition for India's development. But if judiciously treated, it could be a handy aid in this process. Let us now appraise the trends and the impact on the Indian economy. So after discussing policy, trends and obstacles being faced by the foreign investors, it is worthwhile to have an overview of the impact on the Indian economy. India has, as I said earlier, liberalized her FDI policy regime considerably since 1991. The FDI inflows into India have an increasing trend in post-liberalization regime. It has also been accompanied by change in the sectoral composition, sources and entry modes of FDI. The increasing recognition of India's locations or advantages in knowledge-based industries among MNCs has also led to increasing investment by them in software development and in global research and development centers set up in India to exploit these advantages. The most visible impact of FDI in India is in the manufacturing sector, in expanding the range of products like cars, two-wheelers, consumer durables, food products, and apparel. In the case of services sector, the entry of banks, insurance companies, global management consultancies, and accountancy firms are important examples. The contribution of foreign capital is also notable in the direction of creating positive externalities in the country. The entry of Hyundai Motors illustrates that it has created considerable new investment added to upgrading the auto ancillary industry and exported large volumes which are very significant. FDI is largely attracted to consumer goods production. it is not possible to generalize the impact of foreign investment because effects vary over periods of time by industry and even by company. Economic benefits of FDI are generally difficult to measure with precision. For having a correct perspective on impact, it would be better to have a deeper case-by-case, sector-by-sector, state-by-state study of FDI flows. For reaping positive contribution from foreign investment, one should look at some of the following. Investment should facilitate India's penetration into world markets, and MNCs firms must ensure exports and boost India's competitiveness. India also needs the best technology for producing precision instruments, armaments, life-saving drugs, and in general for all exportable goods. Third, we can also look at that for achieving essential technology transfers in high-tech fields, besides equity participation, India should have a policy package to acquire foreign technologies through the route of joint ventures, licensing technical and service contracts, etc. Fourth, the know-how that the foreign investments bring in must percolate down to indigenous producers. And finally, FDI can be useful only if it is well coordinated, monitored, and tailored so as to fit into an investment process that leads to growth in country's national income and employment generation. The government has a long haul ahead in cleaning up the investment environment. Domestic investment has to lead the way, not foreign investment, keeping in mind FDI was just under 8% of total investment in the country. FDI inflows may not give any boost to the government's ambitious Make in India campaign. The disaggregated data on FDI inflow indicates a much different picture compared to the general perception. Foreign investors are more concerned about decision making, transparency, consistency, and corruption. And unless the government can tackle these, foreign joints will remain just foreign joints. One way to create a better image of India as a business location will be to introduce stability in the system. FDI strategy is not a science but is an art. Strategy has to suit the particular conditions of the country at the particular times and evolve as its needs change and its competitive position in the world alters. Whether or not it achieves its potential will be powerfully influenced by how the Indian government manages its business policy environment. While the quantity of FDI is important, equally important is the quality of FDI. However, it is good to remember that foreign capital is a good servant but a bad master. So let us summarize what we have learned in this module. So we have seen that the Government of India recognizes the important role that foreign direct investment plays in accelerating economic growth in India. We have also learned that portfolio investors do not have as an objective any long-term relationship. Return on the asset is the main determinant for the purchase or sale of their securities. Third thing we have learned is that prior to 1991, India adopted a regime that was perceived to be restrictive towards FDI. We have also learned that explicit curbs on foreign investments were imposed through the introduction of FARA, or Foreign Exchange Regulation Act in 1973, by restricting foreign ownership of shares in enterprises incorporated in India. The next thing was that after 1991, liberal foreign investment policies was followed or was allowed, which brought with it a radical shift in the policy towards FDI. We have also learned that FDI up to 100% is now allowed under the automatic route without prior approval either of the government or the RBI, Reserve Bank of India, in all the activities sectors as specified in the consolidated FDI policy issued by the Government of India from time to time. I'm sure you would recollect, we have also discussed and learned that FDI in activities not covered under the automatic route requires prior approval of the government, which is considered by the Foreign Investment Promotion Board, FIPB. Next we have learned is that the stock of FDI in India increased substantially after the process of economic liberalization gained momentum. Also, that the increased inflows have been characterized by the sharp change in their sectoral composition. Also, we have learned that an important aspect of the inflows is the prominence of Mauritius for routing foreign capital to India, because an important and well-recognized dimension of India's FDI inflows is the fact of foreign investors' extensive use of recognized tax havens for entry into India. We have also discussed that the sluggish trend in FDI flows could be the result of certain institutional factors that dampen the investors' sentiments. I am sure you would also perhaps recollect or refresh yourself that we have learned that there are certain inhibiting factors for FDI, which are bureaucratic procedures, slow decision making, corruption, and poor infrastructure. We have also learned that the country needed to make every effort to lure more FDI, because what works in other countries may not necessarily work in India. On the whole, we may say, however, that foreign capital in large economy like India is neither a panacea for all ailments nor a menace to the sovereignty of the country. Thank you very much. All the best to all of you.